Chapter 2 of Sword in the Stone continues. Please, said the ward, I am a boy whose guardian is Sir Ector. Charming fellow, said the knight. Charming fellow. Never met him in me life. Can you tell me the way back to his castle? Faintest idea, said the knight. Faintest idea. Stranger in these parts myself. I've got lost, said the ward. Funny thing that, what? Now I have been lost for 17 years. Name of King Pellinore, continued the knight. May have heard of me, what? Here the visor shut with a pop, like an echo to the what, but was opened again immediately. 17 years ago, come Michaelmas, had been after the questing beast ever since. Boring, very. I should think it would be, said the ward, who had never heard of King Pellinore or the questing beast, but felt that this was the safest thing to say in the circumstances. It is the burden of the Pellinores, said the knight proudly. Only a Pellinore can catch it. That is, of course, or his next of kin. Train all the Pellinores with the idea in mind. Limited education, really. Few bits and all that. I know what few bits are, said the wart with interest. They are the droppings of the beast pursued. The harbourer that keeps them in his horn. The harbourer keeps them in his horn to show his master, and can tell by them whether it is warrantable, or whether it is a warrantable beast or otherwise, and what state it is in. Intelligent child, remarked King Pellinore. There, now, I carry few bits about with me practically all the time. Insanitary habit, added the king, beginning to look rather dejected, and quite pointless. Only one questing beast, you know. So, so there can't be any question whether it is warrantable or not. Here his visor began to droop so much that the wart decided he had better forget his own troubles and try to cheer his companion up by asking questions on the one subject about which King Pellinore seemed qualified to speak. Even talking to a lost royalty was better than being alone in the wood. So what does the questing beast look like? Ah, we call the beast Galtistant, you know, replied the monarch, assuming a learned air and beginning to speak quite volubly. Now the beast Galtistant, as we say in English, the questing beast, you may call it either, he added graciously. This beast has the head of a serpent, the body of a leopard, the haunches of a lion, and is footed like a hart. Whether this beast goes, he makes a noise in his belly like it has been the noise. He makes a noise in his belly as it had been the noise of 30 couple of hounds questing. Except when it is drinking, of course, added the king, severely, as if he had rather shocked himself by leaving this out. It must be a dreadful kind of monster, said the wart, looking about him anxiously. A dreadful monster, repeated the other complacently. It is the beast Galtistant, you know. But how do you follow it? This seemed to be the wrong kind of question, for King Pellinore immediately began to look much more depressed than ever, and glanced over his shoulder so hurriedly that his visor shut down altogether. I have a bracket, said King Pellinore sadly, as he had restored himself. Now there she is, over there. The wart looked in the direction which had been indicated with the despondent thumb, and saw a lot of rope wound round a tree. The other end of the rope was tied to King Pellinore's saddle. I don't see her very well. Wound herself round the other side of the tree, I dare say, said the king, looking round. She's always goes the opposite way to me. The wart went over to the tree and found a large white dog scratching herself for fleas. As soon as she saw the wart, she began wagging her whole body, grinning vacuously, and panting in her efforts to lick his face in spite of the cord. She was too tangled up to move. It's quite a good bracket, said King Pellinore, only it pants so, and gets wound round things, and goes the opposite way. What with that and the visor, what I sometimes don't know which way to turn. Why don't you let her loose? Asked the wart. She would follow the beast just as well like that. She just goes right away, then, you know, and I don't see her sometimes for a week. Gets a bit lonely without her, added the king. Following this beast about what, and never knowing where one is. Makes a bit of company, you know. She seems to have a friendly nature, said the wart. Too friendly. Sometimes I doubt whether she is really after the beast at all. What does she do when she sees it? Nothing, said King Pellinore. Oh, well, said the ward, I dare say she will get to be interested in it after a time. It's 8 months, anyway, since I saw the beast at all. King Pellinore's voice had got sadder and sadder since the beginning of the conversation, and now he definitely began to sniffle. It's the curse of the Pellinores, he exclaimed. Always mollocking about after that beastly beast. What on earth uses it anyway? First you have to stop to unwind the bracket. Then your visor falls down. Then you can't see through your spectacles. Nowhere to sleep. Never know where you are. Rheumatism in winter. Sunstroke in the summer. All this beastly armor takes hours to put on. When is it on this? When it's on, it's either frying or freezing, and it gets rusty. You have to sit up all night polishing the stuff. Oh, how I do wish I had a nice house of my own to live in. A house with beds in it, and real pillows and sheets. If I were rich, that's what I would buy. A nice bed, with a nice pillow, and a nice sheet that you could lie in, and then I would put this beastly horse in a meadow, and tell that beastly bracket to run away and play, and throw all this beastly armor out the window, and let the beastly beast go and chase itself, that I would. If you could show me the way home, said the wart craftily, I am sure Sir Ector would put you up in a bed for the night. Do you really mean it? Cried King Pellinore. In a bed? A feather bed, said the wart firmly. King Pellinore's eyes grew round as saucers. A feather bed, he repeated slowly. Would it have pillows? Down pillows, whispered. Down pillows. Down pillows, whispered the king, holding his breath and then letting it out in one rush. What a lovely house your guardian must have! I don't think it is more than 2 hours away, said the wart, following up on his advantage. And did this gentleman really send you out to invite me in? Inquired the king wonderingly. He had forgotten all about the wart being lost. How nice of him! How nice of him! How very nice of him! I do think, what? He will be very pleased to see us, said the wart quite truthfully. Oh, how nice of him! Exclaimed the king, again beginning to bustle about with his various trappings. And what a lovely gentleman he must be, to have a feather bed! I suppose I should have to share it with somebody, he added doubtfully. You could have one of your very own. A feather bed of one's very own, exclaimed King Pellinore, with sheets and a pillow, perhaps even 2 pillows, or a pillow and a bolster, and no need to get up in time for breakfast. Does your guardian get up in time for breakfast? Inquired the king, a momentary doubt striking him. Never, said the wart. Fleas in the bed? Asked the king suspiciously. Not one. Well, said King Pellinore, it does sound too nice for words, I must say. A feather bed, and none of those beastly fumins, for ever so long. How long did you say it would take us to get there? 2 hours, said the wart. But he had to shout the second of these words, for the sounds were drowned in his mouth by a dreadful noise, which had that moment arisen beside them. What was that? Exclaimed the wart. Hark! Cried the king. Oh, mercy! Wailed the wart. It is the beast! Shouted the king, and immediately the loving huntsman had forgotten everything else, but was busied about his task. He wiped his spectacles upon the seat of his trousers, the only accessible piece of cloth about him, while the belling and bloody cry arose all around. Balanced then on the end of his long nose, just before the visor automatically clapped, too, clutched his jousting lance in his right hand, and galloped off in the direction of the noise. He was brought up short by the rope which had been wound round the tree. The vacuous bracket, meanwhile, giving a melancholy yelp, and fell off his horse with a tremendous clang. In a second he was up again, the wart convinced that his spectacles must be broken, and hopping round the white horse, with one foot in the stirrup. The girth stood the test, and he was in the saddle somehow with his jousting lance between his legs, and then he was galloping round and round the tree, in the opposite direction to that in which the bracket had wound itself up. He went round 3 times too often, the bracket meanwhile running and yelping in the opposite direction, and then, after 4 or 5 back casts, they were both free of the obstruction. Yoicks, what? Cried King Pellinore, waving his lance in the air and swaying excitedly in the saddle. Then he disappeared completely into the gloom of the forest, with the unfortunate bracket trailing and howling behind him at the other end of the string. And that's the end of chapter 2.